So let's dive into the audition material. First, we have number 1 here. With number one is marked maestoso moderato. So we're asked to play this majestically with a medium tempo. Right off the bat, also underneath the line is marked marcato, and so we want to play this with a little bit of a marked style, but certainly it's kind of a triumphant, regal nature that we're attempting to play this particular etude with. So especially pay attention to the articulations in this. We have both accents, we have staccatos, and then we also have, with groups of 4/8 notes, we have 2 slurs, 2 tongues, da, 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 da. So we want to make sure that we get those 3 core articulations in this particular etude, and to make sure that we are consistently getting them and demonstrating that as we play this particular etude. A second thing to watch out for in this is the fact that we are in 3/2. So 3 half notes in each measure, and there are really 3 big beats, 1 and 2 and 3, and yum bum ba da dum bum 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 ba dum bum bum bum. It does alternate with 2 2s, so just 2 half notes, but the half note is getting the beat here. You'll notice that when they give you the tempo marking, it's actually listed as half note equals 104 beats per minute. So that's specifically the big beat that you should feel, 1 and 2 and 3 and, when you're putting that into your metronome. One last thing that I will point out on number 1 is on the last line, we have kind of wide-ranging dynamic changes that happen, but I want to actually peel this back to the end of the second line, where it's marked forte in the last measure. That forte is really important because it sets up the last line. If you don't actually achieve a true forte there, it makes it really hard to pull the dynamics back to piano at the beginning of the third line. So really bring out that forte so that you have room to drop to the subito piano at the beginning of the last line, and then we crescendo over the course of just 1 measure to reach forte again by the second measure on the last line. So that 3 measure chunk really demonstrates that you as a player can actually achieve different dynamic changes that are sudden like this. And then also watch at the very last 2 measures, it's dying away, but we don't want it to immediately, the bottom, to fall out from forte to piano at the very end of the excerpt. So make sure that we're actually parsing that out so that da, 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 and it's really kind of fading out as the etude ends. Number 1's pretty straightforward, and good luck with it. With number 2, we have a completely different etude, much slower in this one, and we're attempting a different style. So the first one, we were attempting this kind of majestic style, and with number 2, we're attempting a very legato, broad articulation sound. So especially watch out for the articulation here and the difference. We want to da, da, much more of a do or a nu tongue as opposed to a tu here. With this also, it's in 4/8 as a time signature, so we're really enjoying the different time signatures. First one we had 3/2, this one we have 4/8. So number 2, I think, looks scarier than it actually is. If you can identify where the 4 beats are, I think it actually becomes much easier to look at. So just in the first measure here, there are 4 key places, and you can see space in between all of them. You have yada, da, 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 that gives us 4 beats. Now obviously we don't want it to sound like that, but yada, da, 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 dum, pa, dum, pa, da, dum, pum, really allows us to see this as a true 4-pulse thing, no different than if it were in 4/4, except we're looking at it in 4/8. So don't let all the black ink scare you here. It's not really that bad once you get into it. A couple of places that you'll want to pay attention to with the different time signature. If you look at the end of the first line, we have a triplet measure. Triplet, 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 4. ya da 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 da. That's a little bit different with the triplets. And then also the third measure on the second line, we have nothing but 32nd notes, but those just feel like 16th notes in 4/4. So 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a. So don't let that throw you off at all. Also watch out for the syncopation at the end of the second line, and then also the next to last measure in this etude. Specifically the third and the fourth beats there, where it's 3 and 4 and with a retard, which makes it a little bit more challenging, but we'll get to that in just a second. So again, pay attention to where all the 4 beats are, because I think that's super important. There are 2 tempo changes on this, or in this particular etude. We have a molto rit, and then we have a rit at the very end. So the molto rit is more of a dramatic retard. So make sure that we are really bringing that out, especially into the second half of that measure. I feel like that's what I tend to do, is really draw that in. So yada da 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 dum ba dum bum, and then the odd tempo should feel right back in tempo from the beginning of this etude. The retard at the end is not as dramatic, but we still want to accomplish that kind of feeling. Yada da 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 da. So it's just a little bit more of a difference in gradation. So not quite as severe the second time. Last thing I'll mention is there's a lot of dynamics that actually happen in this one. There's one specific spot at the beginning of the second line where we go from forte down to mezzo piano for one measure, and then it's right back up to forte. So make sure that that mezzo piano really comes down a couple dynamic levels so that there is a difference there, and that the judge will definitely see that you can play both of those dynamic levels as you're doing this. It's not just that, though. At the end of the second line, we're decrescendoing into the key change, and then you start the last line at pianissimo. So it's really important to achieve that pianissimo. So again, just like earlier, we definitely want to control that decrescendo all the way through the end of the second line, so that the pianissimo still has the air behind the sound. So keep a solid stream of air behind the sound, even as you're slowing down to accomplish the diminuendo. Also, one last thing, the second measure on the last line, there's a crescendo there to forte. Make sure we're basically going from pianissimo to forte over the course of one measure. Really have to push air there, or speeding up the air to accomplish that. It's a dramatic change over the course of that one measure. Number 11, take 2. Or number 2, take 11. With number 3, we have we're back to a faster tempo. So we're back in a normal time signature in 4/4, but there are still things that we need to pay attention to in this. So the first thing is quarter note equals 112 is kind of a little bit faster tempo for part of this. So I would definitely practice this with a metronome. Now I would practice all of these with a metronome, but this one especially needs that attention so that it doesn't slow down over the second half of it. So definitely try and keep a consistent tempo. There's one spot with a poco rit where we're slowing down just a little bit at the end of the second line, but other than that, it's a pretty steady tempo at 112 beats per minute. Once again, dynamics play an important role in this as we're going from fortissimo at the beginning of this to a piano in measure 3. The middle of this is kind of a lot of mezzo piano, mezzo forte. And then at the end, we get back to kind of this alternation between fortissimo, piano, fortissimo. So definitely kind of 3 segmented things with the dynamics, but make sure that we are paying attention to those as well. The trickiest thing for me personally was practicing in the next to last measure of this, the 16th note figure that's a C, E flat, G flat, A natural. And so it's a really tricky passage to work on. And so I just wanted to share a little bit of how I practice this. Definitely working on a couple notes back and forth at a time. So just even the C to the E flat, and then the E flat to the G flat until I felt like I had those specific notes in order. Then I'm trying to string them together. I'm doing all of this at a slower tempo until I can string together the 4 notes. And then I'm adding the entire measure at the slower tempo. Once I feel like I've got the entire measure at the slower tempo, consistent at that slower tempo, whether it's something like 84 beats a minute or something like that, then I'm working to speed up the tempo a little bit at a time until I can get it up to 112 beats a minute. Now I will share that doing this over the course of 48 hours is not realistic for something like this. You need the time to gradually do this, whether it's a month or whether it's at least a couple weeks. So just gradually doing that and practicing consistently on that one measure if that's giving you issues. So whether it's that or whether it's something else in this packet, really taking the time to work it over time, I think is really something that you can't beat. So I did mention briefly the poco rit. With the poco rit at the end of the second line, I think you just want to kind of hang on to the C sharp a little bit, and then there's a breath mark that he has into that. But with the breath mark, just keep in mind that we want to keep that crescendo feel going so that we have the forward momentum into the last line with the odd tempo. Da, da, almost stretch. Ya, da, 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 da. So it should be a quick catch breath so that you don't interrupt the forward momentum. That's number 3. So with number 4 is listed and tells us to play with energy. And so I think it's really important to really keep the tempo consistent at 100 beats a minute. Yum ba 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 bum ba dum bum ba dum bum. Especially with the 2/4 measures, so we don't end up dragging. What you're actually doing in this is keeping the 8th note pulse consistent. So the 6/8 is not going to feel, it's not yum ba 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 da ba ba bum ba dum bum ba dum or anything like that. The 8th note is what stays consistent. So yum ba 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 da ba ba bum ba bum bum ba ba bum ba bum ba dum bum 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 ba ba. So, but definitely keeping that 8th note pulse at 200 beats a minute consistent. So the quarter note would be 100, the 8th note would be 200 because you just double. We are in E flat major, so definitely pay attention to A flat. That seems to be the note that gives people the most trouble. And also, I just wanted to point out that we play A flat in 3 different octaves in this. There's a lot of A flat on the second space of the staff, but also you play low A flat right at the beginning of the second line, and then later on in the second line you play high A flat. So definitely watch out for all of those. They're not marked because it's in the key signature, so make sure that you pay attention to A flat throughout this etude. Secondly, the mixed meter is something definitely to keep track of. So again, like I said, the 8th note is consistent. Yum ba 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 da ba ba bum ba bum bum ba bum bum ba ba bum. So as you're practicing this, you can set your metronome at 200 and it will keep track of the 8th note pulse. But since it changes between 2/4 and 6/8, it just makes it more difficult to practice, I think, a little bit. A third thing is the presence of a different articulation thing that we've seen before. We have an accent plus a dash plus a tenuto on that. And so with that articulation, we want to ping the front of the note, but also it doesn't shorten the overall length of the note. So definitely keep it long. Dun, 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 dun. And again, I think that ties back into kind of our energetic feel in this particular etude. On the second line, we have the what I believe is nonette. It's the grouping of 9 on the second measure. That looks scarier than I think it actually is because it's mostly in time. If you think about it, the first 3 6/8 notes are on the C and the D at the beginning of the measure. So we have 3/8 notes left that measure. So it's really just 3 of those notes of the nonette per remaining beat. So da bum ba da 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 dum. So it should be right in time, which I think makes it a little bit easier to practice. Watch out for the rhythm at the end of the second line. He's putting the dotted 8th note in the middle of the figure. I think normally we think of the dotted 8th note as being at the beginning of the figure. So yum bum ba bum bum ba bum bum ba bum. Something to watch out for there. And then, as always, watch out for dynamics. At the beginning of the third line, we're at piano. We make it all the way up to fortissimo. Towards the end of this, the last 2 measures are actually at fortissimo. Also watch out for longer slurs, both the nonette and then also in the last line we have ba da 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 da. Make sure that we're actually doing the slur the way it's written, and we have a couple slur 2s, tongue 2s in that as well. Number 5, this is a very lyrical one. He's actually quoting from a very famous horn solo from Mendelssohn's A Midsummer Night's Dream here at the beginning, and then he basically takes it in another direction. So the first thing you want to pay attention to here is the key signature. There are 5 sharps of the key signature. That makes it a little bit more of a tricky key, so definitely pay attention to which 5 sharps are included, F, C, G, D, and A. We want to pay very close attention to phrasing and direction on this, and also where we're placing our breaths, so that we are leading this and we have peaks and valleys throughout all of our phrases. He's giving you some kind of a roadmap with breath barks included in this, but definitely at the beginning here, we want to shoot for a 4-measure phrase as much as possible, so we're not taking a breath in the middle of that phrase. He is also including some grace notes throughout this. Make sure that the grace notes happen right before the beats. So we da 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 1 2 3 ba da 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 dum. So that those notes are kind of independent of the rhythm. The big rhythms, the non-grace note rhythms, should happen on the beat that they are supposed to happen on. Just a couple other things. There is an indication for poco rubato. I wouldn't do a ton with that. Poco rubato just indicates that we want to have some freedom in the pulse, and so I would suggest that if you want to do that, maybe holding the note right before the breath bark or something like that, just a little bit longer so that it doesn't feel solidly in tempo all the time. I think there's a real danger in doing too much with that, though, especially if you're just like taking certain things out of tempo. And so you don't want to come across as somebody who's not able to like play rhythm or anything like that. So I would be hesitant to do too much, but if you want to hold, like especially the last note of a phrase, just a touch longer, I think that's fine. The end of this obviously ends on a high B. It's decrescendoing into a mezzo piano, so really you need to have solid control of your air. We want to make sure that we have a solid stream of air behind the sound, and we are decrescendoing as we play that. It's a difficult maneuver, but the high B, you want to hold just as long as you can cleanly hold it, hopefully. The caesura that comes right after it should be a clean break. Railroad tracks is sometimes what that's called. And then the last couple measures are marked morendo al fine, so it's dying away towards the end of the etude. The last note is also marked both with a fermata and with lunga, which just means long. So we want to definitely hold that last B, and I would suggest just kind of let the air fall away from that note over time, and it gives it kind of the morendo that he's asking for there. And also, I just want to add a quick note. Thanks so much again for watching this. If I can be of assistance, don't feel free to reach out to me here at GCU at alex.manners@my.gcu.edu. We would love to have you on campus if you, when you get ready to look at colleges. If you're looking for a school that will allow you to keep playing, even if you don't want to major in music, the pep band here has scholarship opportunities available, even for non-music majors, and so we'd love to have you on campus. Thanks so much for preparing this. Good luck. Make sure you get a good night's sleep, eat a good breakfast the morning of, and just relax and have fun as best you can. You're going to do great. Best of luck. Thanks so much.